A tight-knit squad consisting of 4 seasoned investigators and their commanding officer are completely locked in at the Federal Bureau's Tucson headquarters, utilizing massive governmental budgets, top-tier genetic testing facilities, and experts who are agonizingly scrutinizing every single pixel of that security video. Elite psychological profilers are also working around the clock to get inside the heads of these perpetrators, and even now, well into the 37th day of this nightmare, the momentum hasn't stopped. The investigative crew continues to dig up fresh, game-changing clues, most notably that busted electrical junction tucked away just down the street from the victim's residence. This incredibly solid piece of tangible proof strongly backs up the prevailing belief that this snatch and grab was orchestrated with military-like perfection, ensuring the hunt remains as fierce as ever. As her loved ones endure this agonizing limbo, there is absolutely no doubt that an individual out there holds the key to this tragedy, secretly harboring the exact location and critical details needed to finally bring Nancy back where she belonged. Should you possess even the tiniest shred of insight regarding the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie, we implore you to reach out to federal agents without a single second of hesitation. You can dial 1-800-CALL-FBI, which translates to 1-800-2255-324, or simply log on to the internet and drop your leads at tips.fbi.gov. Whistleblowers have the absolute right to keep their identities totally hidden, and a mind-blowing $1.1 million in cold hard cash is waiting for whoever provides the golden ticket that leads to her rescue. For everyone out there obsessively tracking the twists and turns of this mystery, make sure to hit that subscribe button and switch on those alerts right now. We are committed to delivering every single breaking headline, newly uncovered clue, and official press release, because Nancy Guthrie absolutely deserves proper justice, and her devastated relatives deserve real closure. Drop into the comment section and tell us if you actually buy into that whole wireless signal interference hypothesis, and let us know if you truly believe Nancy is still fighting to survive. We also want to hear your personal take on that heavily vandalized power box, so please share your theories and definitely smash that like button if you want to see the bad guys put behind bars. We really appreciate you tuning in today, but please remember that a real person out there holds the secrets to Nancy Guthrie's fate. So if you are that individual, pick up the damn phone and make it right, because an incredibly broken family is desperately waiting for your voice. Based on local chatter, federal investigators spent their time knocking on doors to verify a bizarre detail, a massive blackout of connectivity across the block. Folks living nearby confirmed their home networks completely dropped out sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning on February 1st, aligning perfectly with the exact window of the abduction. At precisely 2:28 on that chilly February 1st morning in 2026, the digital transmission from her internal heart monitor mysteriously flatlined. This life-saving medical implant constantly relayed crucial cardiac data straight to her mobile device through a wireless connection. It went dead and never reconnected, which gave detectives a terrifying clue. The victim had been forcefully separated from her smartphone and taken off the property. However, that chilling detail wasn't the absolute smoking gun pointing to a highly coordinated ambush. 37 days into the search, authorities stumbled upon a deliberately compromised electrical junction unit sitting just down the street from the residence. When pressed by a prominent network journalist about whether this tampering linked back to the kidnapping, local law enforcement refused to deflect the inquiry. They firmly stated that the physical interference is absolutely a focal point in their active hunt for answers. By March 8th, 2026, which marked day 37, officials finally admitted what seasoned detectives had been suspecting all along. This was far from a crime of opportunity. It was a tactically brilliant strike executed with terrifying accuracy and advanced digital weaponry. The perpetrators who vanished with her in the dead of winter clearly possessed an extraordinary level of expertise. These ghosts knew exactly how to manipulate modern tech networks and blindfold high-end alarm grids without breaking a sweat. They mapped out the local grid perfectly, utilizing that knowledge to pull an 84-year-old grandmother completely off the radar without leaving a single cyber trail. We are talking about the elderly mother of a famous morning television host snatched without a trace at 84, Her estate sat in an upscale Arizona community outside Tucson, a wealthy enclave where property values easily range from $800,000 up to several million. It is the kind of suburban paradise boasting non-existent violence, close-knit residents, and completely safe evening strolls. In this peaceful zip code, a senior citizen would naturally feel completely secure sleeping by herself. No one ever expects signal blockers and targeted infrastructure attacks to rip through such an idyllic setting, yet the nightmare became reality. Rewind to the last evening of January 2026, when she shared a lovely meal alongside her family at their local residence. Everything felt remarkably ordinary until her relatives dropped her off at roughly 9:45 in the evening. She secured her deadbolts and turned in for the night, only to vanish into thin air, remaining completely untraceable 37 days later. Before diving into this monumental update that flips the entire narrative, hit that subscribe button and toggle your alerts to stay updated on the investigation. Our channel tracks every fresh lead and federal press release, driven by the absolute necessity of finding closure for the missing victim. Her heartbroken family desperately needs the truth, so make sure you join our community right now. Ring the bell icon because we are sitting on a massive breakthrough following a pointed inquiry made to the sheriff by a major news correspondent today. The journalist specifically asked about the battered telecommunications pedestal situated dangerously close to the crime scene. When asked if the tampered hardware played a role in the abduction, the authorities shot back an immediate reply. They officially acknowledged assessing the hardware as critical evidence, though they kept their cards close to the chest regarding specifics. With the entire nation watching, local deputies would never validate a random clue unless it carried serious weight. They only speak up when pieces of the puzzle align. And to truly grasp the gravity of this, you need to understand how neighborhood wiring functions. We are talking about those ubiquitous painted cabinets sitting quietly on curbsides across suburban America. You probably stroll past them entirely oblivious, completely unaware that they house the vital lifeblood of web access for surrounding households. These unassuming units manage landlines and power feeds, acting as the absolute central hub for community communication. The compromised hub in question happens to sit a mere stone's throw from the target's doorstep. Hidden just out of direct sight lines to avoid unwanted attention, it actively managed the network signals for her entire block in the foothills. The exact phrasing issued by the police is incredibly telling, as they avoided terms implying mere kids causing trouble or a simple mechanical flaw. Describing it specifically with such calculated language hints strongly at intentional sabotage that requires deep forensic analysis. Detectives remain tight-lipped regarding the exact timeline, the method of destruction, and any physical traces left behind by the culprits. However, when you stack this revelation against the recent federal canvassing efforts, a chillingly lucid timeline emerges. It paints a profoundly grim scenario, corroborated by a deep dive investigative piece dropped by major network journalists on the 6th of March. Task force members swarmed the peaceful streets, completely ignoring typical protocol like hunting for dropped weapons or tire tracks. Instead of rummaging through bushes for clues, they went house to house grilling locals with a highly targeted technological inquiry. They simply needed to know if broadband signals flickered out around 2 in the morning, entirely skipping the usual questions about seeing strange vehicles or hearing noises. Several residents corroborated that the feds hyper-fixated on whether the web crashed before dropping another incredibly heavy piece of information on them. Multiple residents in the neighborhood complained about weird web connectivity issues that evening. These were not complete blackouts or scheduled repairs, but rather quick, unexplained stutters isolated to a specific block. The federal agents' sudden interest makes complete sense now, considering the local telecommunications hub had been visibly tampered with. We are looking at solid proof of a deliberate attack on the local grid right when she was grabbed from her home. The motive is incredibly obvious: knocking out the security system, since modern doorbells require a steady wireless signal to capture any video. Without an active network, nothing goes to cloud storage. Notifications fail to trigger, and high-tech deadbolts stop tracking door activity entirely. A dead signal guarantees zero digital footprints, effectively blinding the remote monitoring stations that depend on those real-time updates. Without a steady web link, emergency triggers fail entirely. making cutting the network step one for anyone pulling off a stealthy home invasion in 2026. Taking out the wireless network blinds the electronic watchdogs instantly. Wiping out the digital footprint beforehand was clearly the game plan, though the tampered power hub is far from the only clue left behind. A broadcast journalist named Brian Anton has been tracking this story out of Tucson, and he uncovered a fascinating piece of the puzzle that brings everything into focus. The guy living in the house immediately behind the victim's yard had a pair of surveillance lenses attached to his rear exterior wall. Those lenses pointed straight at her property, operating around the clock for months to catch any movement and sync it online. The setup was flawless until the 1st of February, when both devices randomly dropped off the grid at roughly 2 o'clock in the morning. According to the homeowner's statement to detectives, those gadgets had never suffered a single glitch prior to that moment. Yet on the very evening she vanished, right as she was being grabbed just a few feet over the fence, the security feed died completely, and then things got weirder. The resident's pup startled awake during the graveyard shift, highly unusual for a pet that always sleeps straight through till dawn, especially right near 2 o'clock in the morning. The frantic animal practically demanded to go out, so the guy cracked the door and let his pet into the yard. Instead of exploring or sniffing the grass, the hound just froze in place and locked its gaze directly on the victim's property. It made absolutely no sound, choosing to stay completely still as if reacting to an invisible presence that the blacked out surveillance equipment completely missed. The sequence of events is chilling, considering the surveillance gear completely shut down right as the intruder made his move. Right when an eerie disturbance causes a sleeping animal to jump up and stare into the dark, the digital trail vanishes entirely. Retired federal investigators analyzing these details keep pointing toward one highly specific piece of tactical gear, a wireless signal blocker. This particular gadget scrambles any local broadband frequencies within its range, and possessing one as a regular citizen breaks serious federal laws in America. Despite strict government bans, anyone can easily score one of these pocket-sized gadgets from foreign websites with just a few clicks. These portable units run on basic batteries and work flawlessly by flooding the exact same airwaves that standard household routers rely on. By blasting noise across the 2.4 gigahertz and 5G bands, the jammer easily drowns out normal connections and knocks every gadget offline. Security feeds die instantly and automated hubs shut down completely, with the blackout zone varying based on the hardware's strength. A basic portable unit can wipe out signals within 30 to 50 feet, while premium versions can easily stretch past 100 feet, which is devastating in a cramped suburb. Placing just a single gadget in the right spot could effortlessly blind the digital security for several adjacent homes at once. Name brand porch lenses drop their feeds, interior monitors go dark, and high-tech entry scanners completely stop logging any nearby movement. Automated deadbolts fail to track entries, and wireless burglar alarms lose their fail-safes. A chilling fact that retired federal agent Maureen O'Connell highlighted to Fox News. She pointed out that this level of technical skill is terrifying, as pairing a signal blocker with physical tampering of a neighborhood power hub is far beyond a rookie move. The perpetrator clearly possessed an advanced, expert-tier understanding of modern digital infrastructure. This intruder knew exactly how automated defense networks talk to each other and exactly what it takes to bring them down. Another veteran crime scene analyst named Betsy Brandner Smith actually revealed a totally different angle to Fox News Digital. Her theory is that the authorities likely have a clear target in their crosshairs already, but they are keeping everything under wraps to avoid jeopardizing the case. She even suggested that the people responsible might have circled back to the crime scene long after the victim was initially removed. Sneaking back to look for accidentally dropped clues or to watch the police response proves this was a deeply calculated scheme rather than a spur-of-the-moment crime. It shows a cold, organized, and highly disciplined mindset, which is perfectly backed up by the sheer precision of that evening's sequence of events. Let's break down the 1st of February 2026 step by step. At 1:47 in the morning, the victim is resting peacefully in her completely silent room. Meanwhile, the exterior lens catches a terrifying sight on the front steps, showing a guy with his features entirely hidden behind a heavy winter balaclava. He is wearing dark hand protection, packing a visible sidearm on his waist, and carrying an Ozark Trail brand camping bag slung over his shoulder. The dark-colored bag with lighter trims, a well-known retail store exclusive, sits on the back of a guy who simply stares straight into the lens without a shred of fear. He casually extends his hand toward the device, instantly killing the video feed and leaving the porch scanner totally offline right at 1:47 in the morning. Moving toward 2 o'clock, local authorities from the Puma County Sheriff's Department noted a major shift. According to federal investigators who spoke with locals, that exact window marked the start of the digital blackout. Numerous folks in the area suddenly found their wireless networks failing, dealing with bizarre dropouts and complete signal losses. The guy living right behind Nancy's property saw his pair of smart security cameras die simultaneously, a total first for him. Meanwhile, his hound stirred from sleep, scratching at the door to be let out. Plenty of folks nearby probably suffered identical network crashes but remained fast asleep, completely oblivious to the threat. Then the clock struck 2:28 inside Nancy's private suite. Her mobile device was resting silently right there on the bedside table. The display remained black while it stayed plugged into the wall. That life-saving medical device embedded near her heart consistently beams vital statistics over a wireless frequency a couple of times a day. It constantly monitors her pulse and watches out for any dangerous fluttering. The tech had functioned flawlessly for quite a long stretch without a single hiccup. However, at 2:28 in the morning, the machine attempted its routine backup. It hunted for that familiar wireless tether. It just kept looking. It desperately scanned the airwaves until the link totally died. Nancy's internal monitor simply drifted way too far from her mobile device. Healthcare professionals broke down the chilling reality of this detail. Whenever one of these cardiac monitors fails to transmit, you are generally looking at 3 potential scenarios. The first option means somebody literally extracted the hardware from the patient's chest. That kind of procedure demands a sterile operating room. No burglar is pulling off major surgery during a midnight break-in. The second grim possibility is that the victim passed away. The organ simply quit beating. Without a pulse, the implant automatically ceases its regular data dumps. The third and final scenario happens when the wireless signal snaps because the physical gap between the device and the handset grows too wide. Those short-range frequencies tap out around 30 feet, often failing even closer if heavy barriers or signals block the path. We already know Nancy left her cell resting safely indoors. When her heart monitor dropped offline precisely at 2:28 in the morning, it pointed to one undeniable fact. The elderly woman had been forcefully moved beyond that 30-foot bubble. She was absolutely nowhere near her bedroom, having been snatched up, dragged off her property, and carried away into the darkness. Then came 2:36 in the morning. A smart doorbell situated roughly 2.5 miles away from Nancy's residence recorded a suspicious ride skipping the primary highway, sticking entirely to the shadows of the Catalina foothills before heading toward the busy intersection at East River Road. A former investigator who used to work for the New York police force, Pat Brown, sat down alongside his crew to scrutinize that exact video clip. The squad meticulously picked apart the car's physical features, looking closely at the top contour, the shape of the glass, and those tail lamps. The experts felt highly confident they were staring at a Kia Soul, pointing to its unique angled top and those signature upright brake indicators. However, the truly crucial detail lies elsewhere. It all comes down to the clock. The recording hit exactly at 2:36 in the morning. That was a mere 8 minutes following the cardiac device's final digital handshake. Barely 8 minutes since the intruders dragged her out the door. An 8-minute window provides just the right amount of padding for a criminal to snatch a victim, toss him into a getaway ride, and cover 2.5 miles. That timeline holds up perfectly, even if the driver cruised cautiously through the dirt paths. Local law enforcement leader Chris Nanos mentioned to a major news outlet that his deputies were hunting down that specific car, sorting through hundreds of thousands of commuters roaming Tucson during those dark hours. Still, you really cannot just brush off a chronological lineup that matches up this flawlessly. The medical implant died. At 2:28, the victim was gone. Then, a suspicious ride triggered a lens 2.5 miles down the pavement. The clock read 2:36, leaving a tight 8-minute gap. Furthermore, this entire sequence played out right as the local wireless routers surrounding the target's block went totally haywire. Security feeds went dark right as the neighborhood's main telecommunications hub suffered deliberate vandalism, a terrifying twist that reporters just unveiled to the public. Nobody gets this lucky. We are absolutely not looking at random chance here. This was a highly calculated strike. Just pause and consider the sheer logistical nightmare of pulling this off. The mastermind clearly knew that surviving 2026 meant you could no longer kick down doors in wealthy suburbs to snatch hostages. Not when literally every front step features a high-definition recording lens. You cannot sneak past interconnected alarms tracking every single unlatched deadbolt. It is impossible when the folks next door possess their own surveillance grids. Any successful crew would have to blind the electronics beforehand. The monsters who grabbed this elderly woman grasped that concept perfectly. They deployed illegal signal blockers to instantly wipe out the neighborhood's visual defenses. The attackers intentionally wrecked civic hardware to plunge the entire grid into chaos, most likely combining both sabotage methods for maximum effect. The culprits realized that modern doorbell tech relies on active routers to store data remotely. They possessed the exact skills necessary to kill the video feeds without ever laying a finger on the physical devices. The intruders played the clock like absolute professionals. From 1:47 until 2:28 in the morning, they had exactly 41 minutes to work with. They struck in the dead of night while the whole town was heavily sedated by sleep. The streets were practically empty. Eyewitnesses were non-existent. The disguised phantom first showed up at 1:47. By 2:28, the victim had vanished. That 41-minute stretch gave them enough room to blind the alarms, breach the perimeter, overpower an 84-year-old resident, and smuggle her out. The getaway path was definitely mapped out well in advance. That mystery ride, spotted at 2:36, actively avoided the busy avenues. It hugged the forgotten dirt trails out back. A lead detective shared a blunt assessment with the press, noting that nobody accidentally winds up on that specific path. Navigating that terrain requires severe premeditation. This absolutely rules out some opportunists just cruising the asphalt, hoping to stumble across an easy score. The perpetrator clearly possessed intimate knowledge of the local geography, perfectly aware of which shortcuts lacked digital eyes. They figured out the exact route to slip away from Nancy's cul-de-sac and merge onto a massive intersection completely undetected. The tangible clues scattered behind heavily back up this theory. Hand coverings discarded roughly 2 miles from the crime scene looked identical to the gear worn by the disguised attacker in the captured clips. Forensic tech successfully pulled genetic material from one of those discarded mitts. On March 5th, the county sheriff publicly announced a hit pointing to a nearby food service worker. However, that individual is officially off the hook. Investigators verified a completely harmless reason for the connection, though the remaining evidence is currently undergoing rigorous analysis. The authorities skipped the usual federal laboratories for this one. Instead, they shipped the materials off to an independent scientific hub down in Florida that specifically handles nightmare genetic scenarios. The reasoning behind this move is fascinating. The lead lawman explained to national reporters that they discovered an incredibly complex biological cocktail left behind at the victim's estate. We are talking about severely tangled genetic sequences. The microscopic evidence features biological traces from several different people all smashed together. Whenever crime scene technicians encounter a chaotic genetic soup like this, tearing the distinct identities apart becomes a monumental headache. Unraveling the mess typically eats up several weeks, and occasionally dragging on for months. Elite laboratories rely on cutting-edge technological wizardry to untangle those microscopic clues and draft up clear individual blueprints so they can eventually run them through the national criminal registries. According to Nanos, that blended genetic material likely points to a whole crew invading the estate rather than a single lone wolf. Speaking with Fox News Digital, retired federal investigator Maureen O'Connell explained that a group dynamic changes everything in this scenario. Dangle a $1 million bounty in front of accomplices, and the resulting paranoia becomes absolutely crushing. She suspects a coordinated crew pulled this off, meaning those perpetrators are currently sweating bullets under intense scrutiny, just waiting to see who cracks first. Inevitably, one conspirator begins panicking about their partners snitching to claim that massive payout while they take the fall. The terrifying thought of rotting in a cell while an accomplice cashes a 7-figure check is usually enough to make criminals betray their own crew. O'Connell is convinced this was a heavily compartmentalized scheme requiring a mastermind to draft the blueprint. You would need muscle on the ground, a logistics expert handling transportation, and someone securing a hideout, which perfectly aligns with the advanced gear utilized here, disabling neighborhood power grids, deploying signal blockers, mapping out blind spots, and memorizing getaway paths requires serious coordination. Such tactical precision hints at either ex-military involvement or a highly specialized syndicate, leaving investigators grappling with one massive, lingering mystery. What makes this specific elderly woman the target, especially considering the perpetrators have fired off several extortion letters? The celebrity gossip site TMZ actually intercepted a remarkably elaborate threat while her relatives received their own chilling communications. The kidnappers strictly demanded digital assets, pointedly avoiding mainstream ledgers to dodge federal tracking. They opted for privacy-focused digital coins instead, pairing those financial demands with incredibly gruesome threats about her potential fate. Federal agents took possession of that terrifying letter immediately, yet the public remains completely in the dark regarding any potential financial exchanges. Her relatives are keeping completely silent on the money issue, all while we hit 37 agonizing days without a single sighting. A standard snatch and grab usually wraps up quickly, ending with either a lucrative wire transfer or a safe return. The alternative is hoarding an 84-year-old cardiac patient for over a month with zero payout, which practically defies all criminal logic. Extortion might just be a smokescreen to hide a deeper, secret vendetta tying this wealthy household directly to her captors. Up until now, the local sheriff has played his cards incredibly close to the vest during every single press briefing. However, he finally let an intriguing detail slip during a March 2nd national broadcast, heavily implying that detectives are narrowing in on the culprits. He maintains absolute certainty that his department will eventually crack the puzzle and bring these criminals to justice. Using phrasing like being right on the verge rather than just chasing rumors strongly indicates that authorities possess major unreleased evidence. The sheriff even went out on a limb to express his steadfast conviction that the missing grandmother has survived this ordeal. He admits this optimistic outlook stems mostly from his own hopeful nature rather than concrete proof. Even so, he acknowledges the grim reality of an 84-year-old hostage surviving without proper heart monitoring, despite her generally robust constitution. Keeping an elderly woman locked away in a makeshift prison without immediate access to doctors is a ticking time bomb. 37 days is an absolute eternity in these scenarios, and the mathematical odds of a safe rescue plummet with every sunrise. Despite the grim statistics, law enforcement doubled down on day 33 by completely revamping their entire tactical approach. Initially, the local precinct had essentially thrown their entire roster of detectives at this single high-profile abduction. Pouring every available badge into one mystery quickly became impossible to maintain, considering the city still had murders and robberies happening daily. To fix this bottleneck, leadership carved out a specialized unit consisting of 4 top-tier investigators and a supervising sergeant. This elite squad moved directly into the Regional Federal Bureau, focusing exclusively on rescuing her without any departmental distractions. Tapping into the national intelligence grid allows them to push physical clues through state-of-the-art federal laboratories at lightning speed. They now have instant clearance for the nationwide genetic registry, plus access to elite profilers who literally wrote the book on hostage psychology. Cybercrime veterans are busy dissecting the signal interference hardware, while forensic accountants hunt down any digital coin transfers on the dark web. Behind the scenes, data crunchers are continuously comparing surveillance logs against criminal records to find a match. Moving the command center away from the local precinct is a massive shift, officially putting the feds in the driver's seat for this manhunt. Even though they still consult with the hometown cops, this operation is entirely fueled by Washington's deep pockets and cutting-edge surveillance, which is finally paying off. Unearthed just hours ago, a manipulated electrical panel proves that investigators are actively finding fresh clues 37 days into the nightmare. They are constantly piecing together the timeline, leaning heavily on the 1-800-CALL-FBI national hotline established way back in early February. During those initial chaotic weeks, operators drowned under tens of thousands of frantic callers swearing they had witnessed something shady. Countless civilians convinced themselves they spotted the captive or identified the disguised perpetrator, creating a mountain of well-meaning garbage data. One caller practically swore they caught her buying fuel up in Phoenix, while others confidently pointed fingers at random guys living next door. None of those leads panned out, leaving agents with the incredibly exhausting task of sifting through massive piles of useless hearsay. Detectives chased down and logged every believable clue they got, but that initial flood of incoming tips has seriously dried up lately. On March 5th, Fox News correspondent Matt Finn reported that federal agents admitted public leads are slowing down, which prompted CNN's Josh Campbell to raise a brilliant counterpoint. Getting absolutely buried under piles of useless information can totally derail the entire investigative process. When 90% of those calls lead to nothing, detectives burn 90% of their shift chasing ghosts instead of focusing all that precious energy on actual, concrete evidence. They really need those hours to process genetic material and scrub through security tapes to build a rock-solid case against targets they probably already have in their crosshairs. Seeing that hotline slow down could actually be a massive win, heavily implying that law enforcement has finally zeroed in on their main suspects. Detectives are likely working highly targeted angles in total secrecy, like hunting down the disguised guy spotted on the victim's front steps after federal agents dropped that Ring camera video. Witnesses put this guy somewhere between 5'9" and 5'10" with a totally normal build, but he was rocking some very unique gear that totally gives him away. The video clearly captures a heavily customized firearm carrier strapped right to his waist, not to mention a super flashy ring sitting on his little finger. He was lugging around a dark Ozark Trail knapsack with gray details, and after retired federal agent Jennifer Coffindaffer broke down the clip, she insisted this guy stands out like a sore thumb, everything from his thick brows and facial hair to his distinct fashion sense, and that glaring piece of hand jewelry makes him incredibly easy to spot in a crowd. Looking at all those unique traits combined, I am absolutely convinced that at least one person, or maybe even a whole group, can name this guy right off the bat. There is zero doubt somebody in town knows this dude's name, yet they are keeping their mouths shut out of pure terror, deep-seated loyalty, or maybe even their own dirty hands in the crime. Federal investigators also picked up on another incredibly disturbing detail hidden in the timeline. An insider leaked to Fox News Digital that one specific camera snap happened on an entirely separate day, proving the masked creep actually prowled around the residence long before February 1st to map out his attack. Jason Pack, a retired federal supervisor, explained to Fox News that this level of advanced prep proves this was no spur-of-the-moment hit, but rather a highly sophisticated operation. Those moves scream calculated precision, which totally shifts the legal stakes because mapping out a crime beforehand instantly upgrades the criminal charges prosecutors can throw at you. Getting caught on video from different angles on multiple days while actively trying to hide his face was an absolutely massive blunder for this guy. That careless mistake basically hands the authorities countless extra chances to finally rip off his mask and figure out his real identity. On February 24th, 2026, Savannah Guthrie propped up her phone and broadcasted an absolutely gut-wrenching truth that no child should ever have to confess about their mom admitting she could already be dead. Let us just stop and think about that for a second, because we are talking about Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, a fiercely hardened news veteran with decades of reporting experience. This is the exact same woman who calmly drops the heaviest daily headlines to countless households all across the United States every single morning. She has spent her career reporting on horrific disasters and talking to shattered families without ever losing her cool. But this nightmare is not just another headline, it is her own flesh and blood. And now she is standing in front of the world, openly confronting the brutal possibility that her mom, Nancy, might not have survived. The most optimistic scenario left on the table is simply finding her remains to finally get some closure and give her a proper burial. A grim reality she delivers with a firm voice that barely hides her profound agony. We are fully aware that we might have lost her forever, and her life could very well have already slipped away. It is entirely possible she has already ascended to the creator she adored. happily reuniting in paradise with her parents, her deeply missed brother Pierce, and our own dad. If that turns out to be her ultimate fate, our family will find a way to make peace with it, but we absolutely have to uncover her location and bring her back to us. Just try to wrap your head around the sheer emotional grit it took to film that insanely vulnerable clip and push it out to a global audience. Savannah also made sure to heavily push the financial incentive, stressing that a completely untraceable bounty of $1 million is waiting for whoever steps up to facilitate her mother's safe return. People can drop tips without ever revealing their names, and the massive payout will be handed over in pure paper bills. Federal authorities are tossing an extra $100,000 into the pot for any solid leads that result in finding the victim or locking up the perpetrators responsible. That brings the total package to a staggering $1.1 million, establishing it as one of the most lucrative bounties ever posted for a disappearance in Arizona history. Nobody has stepped up to collect this massive fortune yet, implying that the secret is locked down tight or the people holding the truth are completely paralyzed by fear. Even the promise of total secrecy and $1 million in physical currency hasn't worked, though O'Connell noted that such a gigantic payout inevitably breeds intense paranoia among the accomplices. Sooner or later, the sheer temptation of that cash starts eating away at a person, forcing them to question the loyalty of the people they committed the crime with. A member of the crew will inevitably calculate the massive payout against the danger of getting caught, and eventually, somebody is going to crack under the immense pressure. On March 2nd, the news anchor returned to her mother's property alongside her sister Annie and her brother-in-law to witness the incredibly touching, ever-growing tribute outside, which was packed with bright yellow blossom. Neighbors spent weeks decorating the front lawn with her absolute favorite hue, covering the area in heartfelt notes, glowing wax, captured memories, and spiritual blessings to deeply honor her life. The visiting family members contributed their own beautiful floral arrangements to the massive pile before tucking in a deeply personal, hand-penned letter. Despite being completely engulfed in absolute despair and countless unanswered questions, our fierce devotion remains totally unshaken as we miss you terribly and cherish you always, Mommy. Taking to Instagram with a fresh image, she expressed immense gratitude for the overwhelming affection and spiritual support pouring in from local residents in Tucson and concerned citizens nationwide. She desperately pleaded with her followers to maintain their faith and keep holding on to that vital glimmer of optimism right alongside her family. By March 5th, she had departed the desert landscape and traveled all the way back to New York, stepping foot inside the morning broadcast studio for the very first time since the devastating vanishing occurred. She assured her co-workers that she was still holding strong, maintaining her unbreakable spirit and core identity while clinging tightly to her spiritual beliefs through the absolute darkest of times. A representative from the Today Show recently issued a formal statement expressing continued hope. Even though returning to the broadcast is definitely in her future, her current priority is entirely on comforting her loved ones and fighting for Nancy's safe return, leaving her comeback date completely up in the air. We can expect Savannah back at the anchor desk only when she feels truly prepared, once her family finds some closure, or if getting back into her daily routine helps her process this profound trauma. However, the intense search pushes forward relentlessly, regardless of whether Savannah is stationed in the Empire State or out in the desert, marking 37 grueling days since the ordeal began. We are still completely in the dark regarding some massive puzzle pieces, like the true identity of that masked intruder, even though somebody surely has to recognize those distinct eyebrows, the facial hair, that specific pinky ring, or that highly unusual firearm holster. Yet, not a single soul has stepped into the spotlight with solid answers, leaving authorities scratching their heads over the exact getaway ride. Experts heavily suspect that the automobile caught on tape at 2:36 in the morning was a Kia Soul, though they still cannot say that with absolute 100% certainty. According to Sheriff Nano, investigators are meticulously cross-referencing that footage against hundreds of thousands of similar automobiles, leading everyone to wonder if the kidnappers actually received a payout. Despite the arrival of several highly complex extortion demands, authorities absolutely refuse to confirm if any cash ever traded hands, meaning that if a transaction went down, the feds and the relatives are keeping it totally under wraps. On the flip side, if no cash was ever exchanged, it seriously begs the question of what the actual motive was, bringing us right back to the most terrifying mystery of all regarding Nancy's whereabouts and whether she is even still breathing. Could she be trapped in some desolate desert hideaway, locked inside a suburban home miles away, or potentially smuggled all the way down south past the Mexican border? Maybe she is just 60 miles down the road, or perhaps she has tragically succumbed to severe health issues after suffering through 37 agonizing days without her necessary medical treatments. Sheriff Nano remains remarkably optimistic about her survival, but anyone looking at cold hard statistics knows that the odds drop dramatically with every single sunset. At 84 years old and relying on a pacemaker, she might be tough for a senior citizen, but her advanced age guarantees that surviving in captivity without a doctor makes time her absolute worst enemy. The authorities absolutely refuse to throw in the towel on this 37th day of the search, which falls on March 8th, 2026, especially now that fresh reports are highlighting a heavily tampered utility box. Officials from the Pima County Sheriff's Department have officially verified that they are heavily scrutinizing this electrical equipment as a major focal point of their ongoing probe. When you piece all these bizarre clues together, it paints a rather terrifying picture that perfectly aligns with the signal blocking theories that top-tier security analysts have been tossing around lately. It makes total sense when you consider that every smart doorbell on the block mysteriously completely lost internet connection at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning in a completely unprecedented blackout. Add in the neighborhood dog acting spooked while fixating on her property, her heart monitor flatlining precisely at 2:28 in the morning, and that mystery ride speeding past a camera 2.5 miles down the road just 8 minutes later. We are also dealing with a jumble of genetic material that heavily implies a team effort alongside a disguised prowler caught on camera scoping out the property over the course of several different evenings. Factor in those incredibly advanced extortion letters and the high-tech wizardry required to blind the entire neighborhood's surveillance grid, and it becomes painfully obvious that this was not some spur-of-the-moment crime. Nobody just stumbled into this situation by pure chance, because the sheer level of methodical planning and technical brilliance points directly to hardened professionals with serious backgrounds in bypassing alarm networks and messing with municipal hardware. These culprits clearly memorized the local streets and mapped out flawless getaway paths, operating with a synchronized crew, which is exactly why tossing a $1.1 million bounty into the mix will undoubtedly turn up the heat. When you have a crew running a job like this, human nature dictates that eventually one of those accomplices is going to get incredibly greedy for that massive payday. Pretty soon, somebody is going to realize that covering for a kidnapper is completely foolish compared to securing a lifetime of wealth, and the second that snitch picks up the phone, this entire mystery blows wide open. While we wait for that inevitable betrayal, the dedicated team of law enforcement officers just keeps grinding away at the evidence. If someone is scoping your block or there are unexplained network outages late at night, contact your local authorities and document everything immediately. If you recognize the suspect's thick brows, pinky ring, customized holster, or Ozark Trail bag seen on the footage, contact the FBI right now. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI, submit your tip at tips.fbi.gov, or call the reward line. Over $1.1 million is waiting for the right information. Someone inside this crew will eventually weigh that reward against the risk of staying silent. That one phone call breaks the entire case wide open. Savannah Guthrie stood before the world and said she may have already lost her mother. That kind of courage demands an answer from someone who knows the truth. Nancy is a mother, a grandmother, and a woman whose family is waiting. 37 days is too long. If you know something, make the call today. Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in a meticulously planned operation that blinded every camera on her block before she was grabbed. At 1:47 a.m., a disguised intruder disabled her front door camera. By 2:28 a.m., her heart monitor lost its signal entirely. Neighbors reported a complete wireless blackout across the block that same night, later linked to a tampered telecom junction box down the street. The perpetrators used illegal signal jammers to kill every smart doorbell, alarm, and remote monitor in the surrounding homes simultaneously. A neighbor's dog woke at 2 a.m. and froze, staring at Nancy's property while both security cameras on the rear fence went dead at the same moment. 8 minutes after her heart monitor flatlined, a suspicious vehicle was captured on a camera 2.5 miles away, taking back roads to avoid detection. Forensic evidence at the scene contained DNA from multiple individuals, pointing investigators toward a coordinated crew rather than a single perpetrator. The suspect had been caught on separate cameras scoping out the property days before the abduction, proving this crime was rehearsed and deliberate. This level of technical precision, disabling an entire neighborhood grid, requires deep knowledge of digital infrastructure far beyond ordinary criminal capability. Smart home technology alone cannot protect you. Determined criminals can blind your entire security system in seconds with widely available illegal devices. Know your neighbors. A dog that suddenly stares at a fence in silence, and cameras that drop offline at 2 a.m. are warning signs worth reporting. Consider cellular-based backup cameras that operate independently of your home Wi-Fi, since a jammer cannot cut a mobile data signal the same way.